I'm 29 years old, and last month I accomplished something I'd been working toward for nearly a decade. I bought my first house. For most people, that's a milestone filled with joy and pride, the reward of years of sacrifice. For me, it turned into the beginning of the most surreal, painful, and absurd family drama I could ever imagine. Let me back up. I grew up the oldest of two kids. My younger sister, Alina, is 3 years younger than me, and from the time we were children, the roles in our family were crystal clear. I was the responsible one, the one who had to figure things out for himself, while Alina was the golden child. She was pampered, protected, and showered with opportunities that I could only dream of. When I turned 16, I got my first part-time job at a grocery store. After that came pizza delivery, stocking shelves, cleaning, anything that would bring in a paycheck. While my friends were hanging out after school, I was working late shifts, saving every single dollar I could. At 18, I became financially independent. I remember buying my first car, a beat-up old sedan with over 200,000 miles on it that cost me $900. It was ugly, unreliable, and broke down every few months, but it was mine. Bought with my own money. Meanwhile, Alina's 16th birthday present was a brand new car with a bow on top, courtesy of Mom and Dad. She didn't have to get a job because they wanted her to focus on her future. Her future, of course, included a private university, semesters abroad in Italy and France, spring break trips with friends, and eventually, a master's degree in art history. Every expense was covered. Tuition, housing, food, even spending money. If she wanted it, they provided it.
Me?
I went to community college because it was all I could afford. I worked full-time while juggling classes. I asked my parents once if they could help with textbooks. Their response? We're focusing on Alina's education right now. That was a polite way of saying, you're on your own. So I learned to survive on my own. Eventually, I found my path in tech. I did coding boot camps, got my IT certifications, and landed a job in cybersecurity. It wasn't easy. I lived with roommates well into my 20s, skipped vacations, bought cheap clothes, and cooked at home instead of eating out. Every dollar I could spare went into savings. I wasn't just saving for a house. I was saving for independence, stability, and proof that I could make it without anyone's help. 8 years later, I finally reached that goal. After scrimping and sacrificing, I signed the papers on a beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a big backyard. It cost me $385,000. I'd saved enough for a full 20% down payment, and I locked in a decent mortgage rate. Standing in the empty living room the first night, I felt a wave of pride. This wasn't just a house. It was a monument to every sacrifice I'd made, every sleepless night, every long shift at jobs I hated. This was mine. 2 days later, everything changed. I got a text from my dad. We need to discuss the house situation. Call me immediately. I didn't think much of it. Maybe they wanted to come visit, or maybe they were planning a family dinner. I called him back, cheerful, expecting congratulations. Instead, his voice was cold and serious. Look, son, he began, we've been talking as a family, and we think it's only fair that Alina gets the house. I froze. What are you talking about, Dad? My house. Yes, he said firmly. She's struggling. She has student loans, she can't afford rent, and she needs stability. You're doing well. You can easily buy another house. I actually laughed because it sounded like the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. You've got to be joking. He wasn't. Mom got on the phone. Listen, we raised you, supported you, gave you everything. Now it's time to give back to the family. Your sister deserves this chance. I was stunned. Mom, I saved for 8 years to buy this house. This isn't some gift I stumbled into. It's my life's work. Family helps family, she snapped back. Don't be selfish. You'll always land on your feet. Your sister won't. The calls spiraled into shouting. My dad accused me of being ungrateful, saying I owed them for all the years they fed and clothed me. Mom cried about family values. My sister didn't say a word, but I could hear her in the background. Eventually, I hung up. I thought that was the end of it. I thought they'd cool down, and realize how insane they were being. But 1 week later, I was served papers. My own parents were suing me for my house. When I first read the lawsuit, I honestly thought it was some kind of cruel prank. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the pages. The claims were absurd, that I owed my parents reimbursement for raising expenses, that my sister had a greater need for the property, and that my purchase of the house was done with family funds. Family funds? I had worked myself to the bone for this house. Every cent of that down payment came from years of sweat and sacrifice. Not a single dollar of theirs had gone into it. But here it was, written in black and white, signed by my own parents. I remember sitting at my kitchen table that night, staring at the papers while Luna, my golden retriever, lay at my feet. The house was still mostly empty, just a couch, a table, and a bed, but it was mine. And now, the two people who had brought me into this world were trying to rip it away from me. At first, I thought maybe it was a bluff. Maybe they filed just to scare me, hoping I'd give in to avoid conflict. But then the phone calls started. Mom left voicemails sobbing about how Alina was suffering. Dad's messages were colder. You'll regret fighting this. We're your parents. We gave you everything. You can't win against us. Alina finally sent me a text. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just sign the house over. It's the right thing to do. That text shattered me more than the lawsuit. She wasn't begging. She wasn't ashamed. She was entitled, confident, as if I had no right to say no. The following week was chaos. Word spread through the family fast because my parents made sure of it. Aunts, uncles, cousins started calling me, some out of curiosity, others to pressure me. They're your parents, one uncle lectured. They gave you life. What's a house compared to that? A cousin told me I was selfish for choosing bricks over blood. Only my grandfather, my dad's father, quietly called me one evening and said, "Don't let them bully you, son. I've seen how they've treated you compared to your sister. You've worked for this. Hold your ground." That call kept me sane. The court date was set 3 months later, but the harassment began immediately. My parents showed up outside my house one evening with Alina in tow. They rang the bell for 30 minutes straight, shouting about family duty. I didn't answer. Eventually, they left, but not before my dad slipped a handwritten letter under the door. It read, "Last chance to do this the easy way. Give Alina the house, or we'll take everything." I installed security cameras the next morning. At work, I could barely focus. My coworkers noticed how distracted I was. One of them, Mia, pulled me aside and asked what was wrong. When I explained, she stared at me in disbelief. "Your parents are suing you for your house?" Her tone was half pity, half outrage. Word spread around the office, and soon I was the subject of whispered conversations. Some people offered sympathy. Others avoided me, probably assuming there was more to the story than I was saying. Meanwhile, my parents ramped up their campaign online. My mom wrote a long Facebook post about how I had betrayed family values and abandoned my sister in her time of need. Dozens of her friends commented things like, "Shame on him," and "Poor Alina, she deserves better." My sister posted filtered photos of herself with captions like, "Some people forget where they came from." I didn't respond. Not online. Not to texts. Not to calls. I saved everything, screenshots, voicemails, letters. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Evelyn, told me, "Do not engage. Let them bury themselves." The weeks crawled by. Every day felt like walking through a storm, chaotic, unpredictable, suffocating. But beneath the fear and exhaustion, a fire was growing in me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to bow to my parents' demands. For the first time, I had something worth defending. The day of the first court hearing finally came. I wore my best suit, clutching a folder of documents Evelyn had prepared, bank statements, pay stubs, every record proving I alone had paid for the house. Across the aisle, my parents sat with their lawyer, looking self-righteous. Alina sat beside them, smug, as if victory was already hers. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. Months of fear and anger had led to this moment. And as the proceedings began, I realized something. They didn't just want my house. They wanted to break me. The first hearing felt like stepping into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I sat on one side of the courtroom, my lawyer Evelyn beside me, calm and collected. On the other side, my parents sat stiff and self-assured, with Alina between them like a queen waiting for her crown. Their lawyer, a man named Carlton, looked like he'd stepped out of a television drama, sharp suit, slicked back hair, confidence oozing from every word. The case opened with Carlton painting a picture of me as some selfish, greedy son who had taken advantage of family resources and abandoned the values my parents had instilled in me. He claimed my parents had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in raising me, and that it was only fair I return the favor by giving my sister a secure place to live. As he spoke, my mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, sniffing dramatically. My dad stared at me like I was a stranger. And Alina, she smirked. Actually smirked, as if this was entertainment. When it was our turn, Evelyn stood with quiet authority. Your Honor, she began, this entire case is built on entitlement, not evidence. My client worked from the age of 16, has been financially independent since 18, and purchased his home with money he alone earned. We have every pay stub, every tax return, every bank statement to prove it. There is not a shred of truth in the claim that family funds were involved. She handed the judge a thick folder. He flipped through it with a raised brow. And furthermore, she continued, my client's parents are attempting to retroactively charge him for the cost of raising him. If this court entertained such a claim, it would set a dangerous precedent. Children everywhere could be sued for the cost of food, shelter, and clothing they received growing up. Parenting is not a loan. It is a responsibility. For the first time, I saw my parents falter. My mother stopped her fake crying, and my father's jaw tightened. Alina crossed her arms, her smirk fading. The judge asked a few sharp questions. Did you contribute any funds to the purchase of this property? My parents admitted they had not. Do you have documentation of financial support tied directly to this purchase? They did not. The judge's face gave nothing away, but I could feel the tide shifting. Still, the case didn't end that day. It stretched on for months, hearings, motions, endless paperwork. My parents dug in deeper, refusing to back down. They spread rumors through the extended family, telling everyone I was dragging them through court and breaking my sister's heart. The harassment intensified. They started showing up at my workplace, cornering me in the parking lot. I had to call security twice. Once, I found a note taped to my car windshield. It's not too late to do the right thing. Family first. I filed for a restraining order. The judge granted a temporary one, barring them from coming near my house or workplace until the case was resolved. That only fueled their rage. Meanwhile, social media became their weapon of choice. My mom posted long rants about children who forget their roots. My dad shared articles about ungrateful sons. Alina uploaded vague but pointed posts. Some people would rather watch families suffer than share their blessings. Their friends and church community chimed in with sympathy, painting me as the villain. But Evelyn had warned me. Let them keep posting. It all helps us. So I stayed silent, collecting screenshots. Behind the scenes, though, the stress was eating me alive. I lost weight. My sleep was wrecked. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, replaying arguments in my head. Some mornings I sat in the shower for half an hour, just staring at the tiles, wondering how the people who raised me could turn so cruel. The only things keeping me grounded were Luna, my dog, who never failed to nudge my hand with her nose when I was spiraling, and my grandfather, who called me once a week to remind me I wasn't crazy. You're doing the right thing, boy, he'd say. Don't let them steal from you what you earned. Finally, after almost a year of back and forth, delays, and emotional torture, the day of the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was tense, almost electric. My parents sat rigid, their lawyer looking less cocky than before. Alina wore all black, like she was attending a funeral. Evelyn whispered to me, "Stay calm. The evidence is airtight." The judge reviewed everything, the bank statements, The testimony, the social media posts, even the restraining order. When he finally spoke, the room fell silent. This court finds no legal basis for the plaintiff's claims. Parenting does not constitute a financial loan. The defendant purchased his home independently, with his own funds. The case is dismissed.
Dismissed.
The word rang in my ears like church bells. My shoulders sagged with relief. Evelyn smiled, but my eyes burned with tears I refused to shed in front of them. My parents erupted. My mother wailed, as if someone had died. My father shouted, "This isn't over." Alina stormed out, slamming the door so hard it echoed through the courtroom. But it was over. Legally, at least. Outside, as I stood on the courthouse steps, the sun warming my face, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and grief. I had won, but at the cost of my family. That night, I sat on my couch in my still sparsely furnished living room. Luna curled up beside me. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their toxic version of love. I was free, but freedom came with a price. My parents disowned me. My sister blocked me. Half my extended family cut me off. And yet, for the first time, I felt like I could finally breathe. After the dismissal, life didn't snap back to normal. The case was over, yes, but the wounds it left behind ran deeper than I ever thought possible. The courthouse victory was only the beginning of a different kind of battle, one that wasn't fought in front of a judge, but inside my own head and in the quiet spaces of my daily life. The first week after the trial, the silence from my parents was deafening. No calls, no texts, nothing. I thought maybe they'd retreat, lick their wounds, and move on. I was wrong. They turned to scorched earth tactics instead. My mother posted long, melodramatic rants on Facebook. Some children repay love with betrayal. Some forget the sacrifices that gave them life. My daughter deserves a home, not heartbreak. She attached old photos of me as a baby, as a teenager, with captions like, "This is what unconditional love looks like, until it's not enough." My father, less dramatic but just as venomous, told anyone who'd listen that I had destroyed our family legacy. At church, at neighborhood gatherings, even at his work. He wanted people to see me as selfish, heartless, a man who abandoned his blood for money. And Alina, she doubled down on the victim act. She posted filtered selfies with captions like, "Trying to stay strong while my brother steals my future," and launched a GoFundMe titled, "Help Me Rebuild My Life After Betrayal." The description claimed I manipulated the legal system and used cold, corporate money to crush family values. For days, I watched in disbelief as strangers actually donated. Hundreds of dollars trickled in, fueled by her carefully crafted sob story.
But it didn't last.
Screenshots of the trial dismissal circulated. People realized she wasn't being robbed. She had never owned anything to begin with. Donations slowed, then stopped. Eventually, GoFundMe pulled the page down for misrepresentation. Alina lashed out on Instagram, calling me a monster. I didn't respond. By then, I'd learned silence was my greatest weapon. Every angry post, every lie, every smear campaign only exposed them more. I let them dig their own grave. Still, the emotional toll was heavy. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes of their words. "You owe us. Family helps family. You're not my son anymore." It's strange how even when you know something is toxic, some part of you still aches for it. I missed having parents to call when I had good news. I missed the illusion of belonging, even if it was always conditional. There were nights I nearly broke down and texted them, ready to apologize just to make the pain stop. But every time, I remembered Evelyn's words, "Boundaries aren't cruelty, they're survival." And I remembered the look on Alina's face in court, the entitlement, the smirk, the certainty that my hard work belonged to her. That killed any temptation to cave. Then came the vandalism attempt. One evening, reviewing footage from my security cameras, I saw Alina approaching my car. She looked around nervously, touched the door handle, then backed away. Later that night, my aunt showed up with a spray paint can, but fled when the motion lights flicked on. My hands shook as I watched the footage, fury and sadness mixing in my chest. That was the line. I filed a police report. The restraining order against my aunt became permanent after she violated the temporary one. My sister escaped formal charges barely, but it drove home just how far they were willing to go. And yet, as ugly as things became, the storm eventually started to fade. The gossip in town shifted. My grandparents, God bless them, sided with me loudly and publicly. My grandfather, a quiet man of few words, told my parents they were disgraceful excuses for parents and praised me for building a life on my own. My grandmother, softer but firm, said, "Love doesn't come with receipts." Their voices carried weight. People started whispering that maybe my parents had gone too far. At church, families avoided them. My mother's dramatic Facebook posts stopped getting sympathy and started getting awkward silence. My father, once so proud of his family image, began shrinking in public. Alina, forced to work at a coffee shop, posted bitter rants about the system and toxic brothers, but her followers dwindled. Meanwhile, my life slowly, quietly began to bloom. I poured energy into my career, and it paid off. A promotion came through, raising my salary and giving me a leadership role. For the first time, I felt not just like I was surviving, but thriving. I upgraded my home security, fixed up the backyard, and finally started making the house feel like mine. Luna, my German Shepherd mix, became my anchor. Her wagging tail when I came home, her goofy barking at squirrels, her steady weight when she curled against me on the couch, she reminded me daily of what unconditional loyalty looked like. And then the dinners with Grandpa started. He called me one Sunday afternoon and said, "What are you doing tonight?" When I told him nothing, he showed up with a bag of groceries and said, "Good, let's cook." It became a ritual. Every Sunday, he'd come over. Sometimes Grandma joined, sometimes not, but Grandpa was always there. We cooked, we ate, we talked. He started teaching me woodworking in my garage, showing me how to cut, sand, and shape wood into something useful and beautiful. "Hands busy, mind calm," he'd say. Those nights healed something in me I didn't know was broken. He told me stories I'd never heard, about how my dad had always been insecure, always competing, always convinced the world owed him more. About how my aunt resented my mom for years. About how he, too, had stood his ground when his family tried to control him. "You've got more backbone than your father ever did," he told me once. It was the closest I'd ever come to crying in front of him. Over time, I realized the truth. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, respect, and mutual care. My parents had chosen entitlement over love. My sister had chosen jealousy over respect. My aunt had chosen hatred over decency. But I had friends who showed up to help me paint walls, co-workers who supported me through the trial, and a grandfather who came every Sunday without fail. That was family. 6 months after the final ruling, I stood in my backyard, looking at the house I had nearly lost, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The grass was greener than when I bought it, the flowers I planted were starting to bloom, and Luna bounded happily across the yard. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a fortress I was defending. It felt like home. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Finances are tight.
Can you help us out?"
I stared at it for a long time. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just another demand. I deleted it without replying. A week later, my dad emailed, "When will you forgive us? Families should stick together." Again, no remorse, no accountability. Just an expectation that I'd come crawling back. I never replied. The truth is, I don't need them anymore. And that's not bitterness. It's freedom. People ask me if I regret it. If I regret fighting, if I regret losing my family. The answer is no. Because what I lost was never really family. What I gained was a life of my own making. And the best revenge, the sweetest revenge, isn't anger or retaliation. It's living well. It's laughing with friends around my dining table. It's teaching Luna new tricks in the yard. It's sitting in my garage with Grandpa, sanding wood while he tells stories. It's waking up every morning in a house I worked for, earned, and protected. One night, as I locked up and looked at the quiet street outside, I realized something. They thought they were suing me for a house. But what they really tried to steal was my independence, my dignity, my future. And I didn't let them. So I'll keep my house. I'll keep my dog. I'll keep my peace. And they can keep their bitterness. Because in the end, I didn't just win in court. I won my freedom. And that, more than anything, is priceless. And with that, our story comes to an end, but the real story begins with your thoughts. What would you do if you were in this situation? Let me know in the comments.